We're about to begin, folks. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the forum at St. Bart's. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as the vicar here, and it's my joy and delight to welcome you to this conversation with Bishop Mary Glasspool, Bishop Assistant for the Episcopal Diocese of New York. We are very fortunate to have her as our bishop and to have her here with us today. And to introduce her more fully, I'm going to hand it over to our rector, another bishop, Bishop Dean Wolfe.
Well, we're really glad to have Mary Glasspool here. And Mary's done just a whole, about all the things you can do in the church. She's been a rector of a parish. She's been a canon. She's served as a bishop assistant. She was suffragan bishop in the Diocese of Los Angeles. She does a lot of work in the wider church, very respected for being a straight shooter. I'm looking forward to what you have to say today, because I know Mary won't hold back, and I'm counting on it, you know? So it's just great to have you here, Mary. And welcome to our audience. We have a full group of people here, but we have people watching from all over the country and all over the world. So we're glad to have you.
Wonderful. Well, I'm Mary Glasspool, and I'm delighted to be here with you, Dean, with you, Peter, and with all of you at St. Bartholomew's. And I'm just going to jump right in. At the title of this forum was a little bit forced, in that Peter demanded there be a title, you know? And so I sort of said the first thing that came into my head, and then I thought about what we might talk about afterwards. And I hope that, you know, we will hear from all of you. Technology in the church. I'm serving, leading up to a very reduced General Convention this year of 4 days in length, and who knows how many people, but we're really cutting down on the number of people, and no exhibition hall. And Dean and I were speaking earlier, and you know, General Convention's kind of the venue for people to reconnect and network and build relationships. That's not really going to happen much this year. We're getting together to do what somebody considers the essential work of the church, and that'll be passing the budget for the next 2 years for the whole church, doing elections, and then looking at critical resolutions. And of course, the definition of critical is left up to us, in a sense. So I'm sure there'll be some conversation about that. So out of my committee, one resolution stuck out particularly. And again, Dean and I talked earlier, we have loads of resolutions, and some of them that my committee is dealing with are like the Episcopal Church agrees that we step back from the brink of nuclear war, and it's kind of a no-brainer, and we're asking for those kinds of resolutions to be put on what's called the consent calendar, which means it'll just get run by us nominally, and there won't be an opportunity for discussion. And I don't know if there'll be an opportunity for this particular resolution to be discussed, but I think it's important enough to maybe begin the discussion here. A resolution was aired in our committee called Addressing the Implications of the Digital Age. And if you'll bear with me, I'd like to read it and then just open it up to either debate, dialogue, questions, whatever. I probably should read the explanation first and let you write the resolution, but the resolution's already been written. Resolved that this 80th General Convention acknowledge that we are living in a time when technology is both opening new doors for connection and possibility, and also mechanisms for surveillance and intrusion. And that as a society and as a church, we have not fully grappled with the practical and ethical implications of the transition to the digital age. And be it further resolved that this convention encourage the Theology Committee of the House of Bishops to consider studying and reporting on the uses and abuses, possibilities and detriments of technology in our daily and institutional lives, including for prayer and worship, work and family life, and on the ethical and theological implications of the new digital age for our interior lives, our prayer practices, our connections to each other and to all creation, and ultimately our connection to God. And be it further resolved that the Episcopal Church, with the help of the Office of Government Relations and the Episcopal Public Policy Network, support policies at the local, state, national, and international levels of governance and agreement to regulate technology companies to protect consumers, especially children and youth, from unreasonable surveillance, personal data collection, addictive features, and harmful content, regulate the use of digital technology and artificial intelligence in the workplace to surveil, monitor, and manage workers in order to uphold workers' rights to organize, to privacy, to safe working conditions, and to equal opportunity. Regulate the use of data collection and storage by public authorities, including local, national, and international law enforcement agencies, to safeguard society while shielding people from unreasonable intrusions of policy. Support public investment to close the digital wealth and racial divide in access to technology and technology education. And be it further resolved, this is the last one, that the Episcopal Church call upon large data and technology companies to carry out independent and ongoing ethical reviews of their products and their impacts on people, especially vulnerable populations such as children and youth, and society as a whole, including our democratic systems and workplaces, and to have processes in place to mitigate harm, and that the Committee on Corporate Social Responsibility of the Executive Council of the Episcopal Church be tasked with engaging relevant companies in the Church's investment portfolio on these ethical questions. Now that's a lot, and that may be too much. That may be like throwing a banquet of food on the floor for fodder. But it is, and it's meant to be just suggestive of what we can talk about. Some of what we talked about even before the 9 o'clock service were things like, wow, this is sort of, technology has provided a new angle on evangelism with people tuning in online to worship services at St. Bartholomew's from Singapore and from Texas and from other areas of the country and the world. Access to those worship services for people who might be homebound or on vacation or somewhere else, that kind of thing. So it's both positive and negative. It's not an attack on technology, it's just an invitation to consider the implications of the digital age for the life of the church. And of course, we're living in a reality that continues to change rapidly, and we have yet in our moral and ethical, our interior lives, our thinking about it, we have yet to catch up with that reality, and maybe catching up isn't even a good metaphor to use, but let's talk about it.
All right, so we're going to do something that we haven't done in a long time, and if you have a question, I'm going to bring the microphone around to you if you're here in the room, and because this is a forum on technology and the church, if you have a question and you're online, you're welcome to send those in as well. You can use the live chat function on YouTube, the comments function on Facebook, or you can email me, pthompson@stbarts.org. That's pthompson@stbarts.org. And there's yet another option if you're here in the room and don't feel comfortable raising your hand and speaking. My colleague Manny Rodriguez-Leach has question cards, and you can write those questions out.
And while you're forming those questions, I just begin by saying, Mary, you've been traveling around the Diocese of New York. What are you seeing in terms of parishes using technology?
Yeah.
Are you encouraged by that, or worried, or?
I am encouraged. I don't know a single congregation who is coming through the pandemic, so to speak. I don't know a single congregation in the Diocese of New York that's saying, well, now we can take down the cameras and the microphones. So hybrid worship, a both and, is here to stay. And I also see a huge disparity in the resources among our own parishes, our own congregations in the Diocese of New York. You're very sophisticated here at St. Bart's on Park Avenue, and we have probably state-of-the-art cameras and online systems, and there are congregations in the Diocese of New York where the senior warden gets up with his cell phone and sort of videos around the service. I mean, they're all different levels of technology, and again, the kind of economic gaps show in the technology aspect of our lives together, as well as other aspects.
Bishop Glasspool, what are the theological issues at play here? There's a lot of talk about incarnation and embodiment. What do you think we should be thinking of theologically when it comes to technology in the church?
That's a great question. I think we need to be thinking about our relationship with God and our relationship with the incarnate Jesus, whom we Christians consider the Christ, God incarnate. So there's definitely a theological aspect to the incarnation upon which our sacramental theology is based. In other words, I say a little bit flippantly, you can't baptize a baby by throwing water at a Zoom screen. The sacraments really are dependent on touch, whether it's laying hands on a head or consuming consecrated bread and wine, or the rings in marriage, the saying of vows. I know that there are marriages that occur online now. They're not, I would say, they're not sacramental marriages. They're more on the contract aspect of marriage. So I believe that the church's sacramental theology is based on touch, and so touch is required. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a lot of conversation about the Holy Eucharist, communion, and in my thinking, this is me trying to speak plainly. In my thinking, putting consecrated hosts in an envelope and mailing them to parishioners is not Holy Communion. It's not the Eucharist. A layperson, I think, put her finger on it when she said to me, what we've lost during the pandemic is the capacity to gather as the body of Christ. We were precluded from gathering together to be the body of Christ, broken and distributed for the world. So, we're moving into a both and thing. So again, we talked earlier, St. Bart's is a beautiful, beautiful church. It's historic and it's gorgeous. And I want, and perhaps you do too, for people to look at the decorated ceilings and the mosaics in the church and the community of people that is gathered, and to have that person in Singapore say, When I visit New York, I'm going there. Or the person, you had visitors today, I mean, it seemed like half of the people at the 9 o'clock service were from somewhere else. And they chose to come to St. Bart's. So it's a both and. I think the theology of what we mean by community needs to be looked at. I'm a word person, so I think my own definition of access as a word was broadened during the pandemic, and we need to be careful around that as we talk about who has access to the technology. Another word that I think changed for me during the pandemic that has some theological significance is the word presence. This kind of presence is different than the kind of presence that you sort of can feel online, but it's a different experience for me. So I look at, there are meetings that we have that the bishop's staff is either a liaison to or oversees, that we're going to have them mostly online from here on in because we've eliminated the dean's meetings, for example. We've eliminated travel. The dean of Staten Island has to spend a whole day coming to an in-person meeting at 1047 Amsterdam Avenue. He only has to spend 2 hours of his day when we have it via Zoom. So all of that is good. But the presence piece is different.
I'll get you, Natalie, next. There's a question from one of our online viewers who asks about the impact you see on the local church. This person says that he attends St. Bart's 11 a.m. virtually, and he feels more comfortable doing that than going to his local church in person. And what effect do you see on kind of small local churches as opposed to bigger places like St. Bart's?
Sure. Well, we're not finished with the pandemic yet, and people have different levels of risk capacity. People have, what has been commonly talked about as underlying conditions or concerns that individuals need to take care of, and I am very respectful of that. So if someone feels more comfortable at home worshiping, and I guess I'm assuming that because the word comfort and comfortable was used, that maybe there will come a time, we hope, in the future where in-person gatherings are less risky and people can feel more comfortable and safer coming to an in-person gathering. But if that never happens and people only worship online, okay, that's better than nothing. I would say that perhaps they're missing out on some of the incarnational realities that are very dear to me and that I think most of us experience in in-person worship.
Right.
I love your vision, your visual of the incarnate Jesus and community. I have children in their 30s and 20s. It's hard to get them through a church door. They love spending their lives online. How do you address getting the next generation through the door and seeing the beautiful church when technology is what they know?
Put them in charge of the AV equipment. The church has challenges that we've always had, which is to kind of make ourselves attractive, to invite people, but invite people when there's something special going on here that you want to be a part of. That's always been true in the church. So, I don't know that I have a great answer to that question. I think asking younger people to be a part of whatever the life of the church is doing, and really offering them responsibility. I guess I see some inspiration, and I'm privileged to see it in the confirmation classes, the people that I am privileged to confirm. They have lots of new ideas. And I also have to say, I've been trying to keep up myself online with all the stuff that's going on in the larger church. And I was particularly struck by the president of the House of Deputies, Gay Jennings, who invited those of us who are sort of older, more veteran kind of leaders to trust the younger people in the church, to trust them with the future of the church. And it wasn't just an invitation to trust. It was a voice of encouragement and trustworthiness, and an invitation to let go of whatever my concerns might be of, we always used to do this and we're not doing that anymore. Of course, the church today is not the church I grew up in. That's a given. So I'm going to trust that younger people who care about the church know what they're doing, and I'm happy to pass the baton.
Yes, so I come from a evangelical, non-denominational background, and I'm used to social media and communication being on the forefront of technology being used to reach people, probably to a detriment. And I've found that a lot of the loudest voices that are most accessible tend to not be giving the depth and the value of spirituality that I do find in the Anglican and Episcopal Church. Moving to New York and being a part of this tradition, it's felt more privatized, that people take longer to open up, which I think is totally normal and natural. And you mentioned the speed of technology and AI, and I think you nailed it in the sense of we can't catch up. It's really growing, and in some ways, I guess my question is, how do you bring that incarnational presence and spirit that ideally is found long-term by bringing people in the doors, but what does it look like for a world where people might never come in the doors? Can they still experience that incarnational presence, the message that we as a church bring on their phone screens, through a Zoom screen, et cetera? I'm just curious your perspective on how to maybe meet in the middle and find what the ultimate experience is, but maybe adapted to the world that we live in and what people are open to.
I hope I understand your question.
Sorry, I know that was a lot.
There is a place for everyone in this church. That's what we have fights for, to make sure people feel welcome. And all means all, and everybody means everybody. Can you repeat the question that you said at the end, just so I want to make sure I understand what you're asking?
Yes, basically this incarnational presence you're talking about that's found in person, how do you imagine it being found through technology where people are at? If people don't come through the doors, if they are more comfortable finding it through social media or Zoom, et cetera, and they might say, I really want this, but what if that in person is never a possibility, or I don't have that in my local community? How do you imagine we as a church can bring that message to people and make it accessible and applicable to their lives?
Yeah, I mean, I just believe that you can't do that through technology. With the theology of incarnation is huge in our church. We say that God spoke to us in a language we can all understand, which is the language of human relationship. Now, there are a couple of stories I could tell. This one's happened a while ago, and it really has to do with cell phones. But a friend of mine out in California takes a group of young people, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, to a reservation in South Dakota, Pine Ridge Reservation. It's a summer pilgrimage. They help some of the Native Americans, the Lakota, there with various building projects. And they had as a rule, no cell phone use for two reasons. One is the distraction. And two is that they go to the Pine Ridge Reservation and none of the young people there have cell phones. This was true like 10 years ago, so maybe they do now, I don't know. One year, the young people were bugging my friends so much, they said, okay, we'll try it for a couple days. Well, they drive in a van to get to the Pine Ridge Reservation, and the first night they're staying with sleeping bags in a parish hall, and every single outlet in the parish hall is plugged in with people recharging their cell phones. The second night, they had a fight. The kids had a fight because somebody's cell phone went missing, and that person thought it was, they hadn't even gotten to Pine Ridge Reservation yet. So the adult chaperone said, okay, that's it, we tried it. Here's a basket, everybody's cell phone goes in here, you can get it when you come home. And they started to relate to one another. They started to build community. And one young lady on the return trip said, I don't think I want my cell phone back. I have all these friends now. So it's that kind of thing. I don't know that's not a metaphor or a story that's going to translate well into AI. AI scares me. I have to confess. Mm-hmm. Machines making decisions. I want them to win Jeopardy, but making decisions about my life, that's a little scary.
And Mary, I'd just add also, I think we're going to have to, in some ways, catch up to the technology. We're going to have to find ways for small groups to gather together. I keep thinking that the future of the church is kind of going back to our history. Small discipleship groups meeting in homes. I think that's going to be an important part of the future.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point. Back to the future.
Bishop Glasspool, we have a question about spiritual communion. At the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of parishes, including St. Bart's, said, you can't come to the building in person. Spiritual communion is a way of participating in communion. How is that valid if we can't send out the host by mail or baptize a baby by throwing water at the computer screen?
Well, it's another great question, and I'm not sure I have an adequate answer to it. I think it's a way of acknowledging that there are people at home who aren't there. It's a way of saying, we see you, and we have a relationship with you, and the relationship is not fed or nourished right now by the incarnational contact or connect, but we know you're out there, and the spiritual communion prayer, you're a part of us, or we're a part of you, or we're in this together. That's the best I can do on the spiritual communion thing, because I've actually been in congregations where that prayer is used that points to some different reality than I'm in touch with.
We have it in our leaflet too, and I know that some folks at home pray it.
Yeah.
Are there questions within the room? Christopher?
Bishop Mary, I want to ask you, have you ever been to Africa?
Have I been to Africa?
Yes.
Yeah, I've been to Ghana and Tanzania.
How do it look?
How what?
How do it look? out there.
How did that experience go for you?
How did that experience go for me? Wonderfully. Wonderfully. Are you asking this in relation to technology, or you just want to know that I had a good time, or?
No, how do it look in Africa?
With technology?
No, how do it look out there?
I think it may not be connected to technology. I think the question is, how was your experience?
Oh, it was wonderful. In Ghana, I went in, I guess it was 2004, and I attended and read a lesson at the sort of installation of the primate of West Africa. And I have friends in Ghana. And one of the exciting things looking at the church, the Anglican Communion really, is, you know, if you're someone worried about numbers, the church is growing in Africa. And my friend, George Nikwe, is a brand new bishop suffragan in an as yet to be fully developed diocese that will be a kind of subdivision of Accra. And the country of Ghana, which is right now part of the province of West Africa, is seeking to become its own province because the country of Ghana has like 13 different dioceses. So it was very positive. The Nikwes have come and stayed with us in New York, and I've been there. In Tanzania, we have a companion, the Diocese of New York has a companion relationship with the Diocese of Central Tanganyika, and the Bishop of Central Tanganyika is a man named Dixon Chilangani, and we've had a long-standing relationship that I hope we will continue even as we elect a new bishop.
I'll get you, Casey. Bishop, you don't have me to define these terms, but there are questions about cryptocurrency and NFTs, non-fungible tokens. How do you see them impacting the work of the church, if at all?
Cryptocurrency and what?
NFTs, or like,
See, if
maybe
I have
Casey
to ask
can
him,
explain.
I don't know what it is. I can only, for the benefit, to prevent me from babbling about something I don't know anything about. Cryptocurrency is way beyond me, except I saw that it crashed the other day.
It did, yeah. Yeah.
So how's that working for us?
It's Mary, one of the things that's really great is to have a couple of millennial staff members so that I can say, so what about this? What is that? You know, just.
I don't understand Bitcoin. I barely understand, and I'm just confessing my own ignorance. It's beyond my mental capacity to understand.
So with a lot of technology in the church, I feel like the youngest children tend to get left behind because you can't necessarily put 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds on Zoom for Sunday school. So how do we sort of, as a church and community, bring back sort of youth and families to the church in the time of technology?
What a great question. We do just that. I mean, the question is the answer to the question, which is we focus on youth and children and bring them back in small groups, maybe house churches or forums or whatever, safely. I mean, in New York City, the discussion around school attendance and masking and all that and child development is paramount right now. I mean, it's critical that people understand that young people need the socialization process of being incarnate, and they learn better in person. And again, there are people who know more about that than I do, who can probably say more, but I think the answer is absolutely. We need to focus on raising up young people who, may not be able to staff the video equipment, but have a spiritual life from age 1 day. That's something that I think our whole culture and society is kind of catching up. And when I was growing up, you went to school and it was all about your brain. And you had phys ed, and that was about your body. They didn't do a lot with your emotions. And I didn't recognize that I had a spiritual aspect to my personality till I got to college. And even then, it kind of, I think God gave it to me as gift. But everybody has a spiritual life, no matter what age they are. And so some of the development, some of the creativity may need to be around, well, what is the spiritual life of a 1-year-old? And how do we nourish that spiritual life?
Thank you, Bishop. I have a question. So like you said, that there are certain parishes that do not have very good access to technology, but there are others that have very comprehensive access. Does the diocese take any steps to encourage a uniform adoption of technology, perhaps among those that are not as well endowed?
Can you repeat the last part of that?
Yeah.
I have a hearing defect, so I try to move closer and read lips and all that.
Does the diocese is the diocese taking any steps to promote a uniform access to technology across
great,
all
another
parishes?
great question. Another great question. The answer right now is no. And what you're pointing out is that is something that we need to be proactively attuned to. I've seen, probably you've seen too, out on the internet, protocol for Zoom, for example. I'll share one of my pet peeves, and I want to frame it well so that I don't try not to get misquoted or anything, but it really bothers me when I'm in a meeting and somebody X's out their video, If you're in a meeting, if you were in person, we'd like your full attention, right? If you're these are smaller meetings, not webinars where, whatever, and people are just listening, but so for dean's meetings in the diocese, we say, if you're attending this meeting, please turn your video on. So protocols like that are needed, and I think some of the technology companies have written some of that, but we all need to have our voices heard and say, well, I've had better luck with the norms of starting and ending on time with Zoom, That's been a norm for me in most meetings forever, and it's easier on Zoom. And people feel freer to say, I got a drop dead time at 11 o'clock, I'm out of here, So I think I hear what you're saying, and you've directed me to take that back to the bishop's staff and to start working on some protocols.
It's interesting how some of the bigger churches just got in on this by the skin of their teeth. We had a gift. An anonymous donor gave us a gift of camera equipment in January before the pandemic. We placed the order. We got it just installed the night before. We needed it, or I would have been standing with an iPhone.
Yeah.
We were not at all prepared for that new world.
Yeah, that's what Jean's pointing out. One of the good news pieces of the pandemic, which is all these technologies were existent before we hit the pandemic. It's just that necessity was the mother of invention. Now the Episcopal Church knows and by and large, knows how to utilize the technologies, and it's not afraid to anymore, I hope. Maybe some people are, but...
Hi, Bishop. Thank you for being here. I have a question about your response and the clergy's response to streaming. because I feel when I'm sitting at home and seeing you, like hearing the sermon, but seeing you, I'm connecting. But I'm wondering what your experience is in the pulpit, because you're not seeing any of those people at home. You're not making any connection with them.
Thank you. It's different. It's different. And, you know, I have to hark back to when we were in the real throes of the pandemic, when I would preach online. It was just a totally different experience. Because in my view, preaching is a conversation. And my eyesight seems to sharpen when I'm preaching. I can tell if the person in the fifth pew back there is doing the New York Times crossword puzzle. And I can see somebody in row 8 look at their watch and I think, wrap it up, Glasspool. But I can also see people nodding and agreeing with me, and that nourishes me. And you don't get that on Zoom. So it's a totally different experience. And one that, I don't know, you'd have to answer it from the perspective of somebody who's listening to a sermon online. I just feel like it's a different thing. It's like more a lecture than it is a sermon. But I'm not quibbling about definition of words. It's a different experience.
And this space, Mary, is so, it's such a large space. Having critical mass is huge. Yeah. And so Easter Sunday, we had a bigger crowd than we've had for a while. And people said, wow, you seemed like really on fire. And I was responding to all of the people in the pews on that Sunday.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Today you come in here, have a great sermons and everything. Thank you so much. Yeah. Actually, this is not a question, it's kind of suggestion. And now, these days, the church losing the believers, kind of, and then getting old. This is not only this church, all over the world.
Oh, yeah.
It's all just old people sitting there, and that is keep that church, that's beautiful church. But I think, as a Christian, and this time a lot of people, they're losing their kind of get a loneliness and everything, but they don't know where they go. But person, if they never come into the church, they really hard to get into the church, and then they play things. So I think, as a Christian, I think the mothers bring their kids when they're very, very young, even kind of infant, and after they're baptized, and they bring the kids, and they grow up in the church. So somehow, this church can make some kind of Sunday school, and then that is in the online Sunday school. So some parents, even they don't know about the church anything, Sunday school, and then they try to show to the children. So the children to connecting with the church before their brain is already, big, and so they try to do whatever they want. But they should be learned that they are very young time. So the parents just, let's go to church Sunday. And they come in and they grow up in the church. So they are used in the church. So when they feel lonely, whatever they walk in, they can be connecting, the human. You said that it's human connecting. Yeah. Some kind of thing, they know that they need that. So that time they walk in, they can be church members. But without that, church never can be a grow up thing. And especially now online church is on, and then people see that the online church, they comparing their own town's church. They don't want to go there. They're just sitting there at the online church because totally different sermons, quality of the sermons, all kind of things. So maybe they are not going to their church. They're just sitting in the online church, and then they do. But that makes keep the loneliness. They are not connecting. Yeah, when we're coming to the church, we can see the people, coffee hours, whatever, and then we can make outreach, whatever we can do. But they just sitting in there, and then if young people, they just used to the loneliness. Just the one tablet, they can hold 1 hour, 2 hours, doesn't matter. They don't need anyone. Just to use that. But when they were young age, they go to church. So they grew up in the church, they connected that, and then they can come back to the church when they need. So somehow, I don't know, the church is always getting low budget, but try to get professional teacher, Sunday teacher, every place, or volunteer teachers, and then make bigger Sunday schools. So young kids coming back to the church, and church should be grew up that way.
Yeah.
But if not, I think is a church getting low and getting old, and then looks like that, I think.
No, you make wonderful points, and it connects with your concern over here about this getting younger people involved and early on, and allowing them to relate and claim some of that for their own.
They should know the church. Why is the church? When they need it, they walk in the prayer. Without that,
Unfortunately, we have to stop there. I have to get Bishop Glasspool to the 11 a.m. service. Do you have any final parting words for us, Bishop?
I guess I'm supposed to, right? I'm sure keep on keeping on, I think is what I'd like to say.
Yeah, I would ask Mary, Bishop Glasspool, what gives you hope right now in the church?
Yeah. Actually, the young people give me hope. Hearing some of the questions and concerns, the fact that you all care enough to be here. And I think, I think it's very exciting to be exploring different ways of, when I say evangelism, I mean sharing the good news. What's the good news? God incarnate, Jesus with us, the risen Christ, God speaking to us in the language of relationships. So how do we share that good news? And we're finding ever more creative ways of doing that. So I actually think the church is growing. Numbers of people in a particular building on a particular day of the week at a particular time are not the metric I would use to measure church growth or church decline. I think the church is growing because our young people are continuing to be creative, are taking an interest, are taking positions of leadership. We have challenges and we're moving through them. Things are changing and we're trying to stay with the program. And so I think it's exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop Glasspool.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. We hope you'll stay for worship at 11 a.m. Bishop Glasspool will be presiding and preaching, and she'll be confirming and receiving several of the people in this room. We also hope you'll join us next week for the forum. We will be welcoming Frank Calarius and Crystal Chen of the New York Public Library to offer some summer reading suggestions. See you then.